I've been an Uber driver for almost 3 years now. I do it on the side of my main job to pull in some extra cash. The money is decent, but I've definitely had my fair share of weird encounters over the years. Most of the strange passengers I get are simply drunk or on drugs, but this one passenger I had definitely had bad intentions. It was probably close to midnight on the weekend, and I was doing some late night Uber after my shift to save up for a trip to Italy I planned on going with my friends. The pickup location was in a residential neighborhood not too far from where I was, and the drop-off location was at a Wendy's. I got to the pickup spot in about 5 minutes and saw who I believed to be the passenger sitting on the curb on the side of the road. He was wearing all black baggy clothing and had a black baseball hat on. "You Jason?" I asked. He mumbled something inaudible and got into the car. I'm not one to make conversation unless the passenger initiates it first, so I turned up the music on the radio and began to drive. I noticed he was on his phone a lot, which was not uncommon for Uber passengers. The drive would take roughly 15 minutes, and the whole time the man didn't say a word. I pulled into the parking lot near the entrance of the building and noticed that this particular Wendy's location was closed for renovations. I parked the car, and the man finally spoke. "I didn't realize this location was closed. Can you just drop me off at a friend's house?" I was a bit annoyed at this, but agreed, and asked him to change the location in the Uber app. He refused, saying it was a 2-minute drive down the road. At this point, I should have just told the man to get out of my car, but I stupidly agreed and had him direct me to his friend's house. As I drove, I noticed it was taking much longer than 2 minutes. 5 went by, and I asked him if we were almost there. "It's right down the road," he said. I drove down a small road surrounded by trees and stopped at the end. There was what looked to be an abandoned house, which terrified me. I put my car in park and gestured for the man to get out. He didn't. He just sat in the back seat, staring at me through my car's mirror. That was when I saw a bunch of men approaching my car from the outside. They ordered me to get out, and I obliged. I knew that I was outnumbered and did not want to risk my life putting up a fight. I got out of the car and slowly backed away. The men got into the car and drove away, leaving me stranded. They took everything: my keys, wallet, phone. I had no way of contacting anyone. I walked until I saw a house with its porch lights on. I knocked a few times, and thank God someone answered. They let me in to use their phone, and I immediately called 911. An officer came to pick me up, take my statement, and drive me back to my house. It was probably 4:30 a.m. by the time I got home, and I couldn't relax. I got almost no sleep. A few days later, the police found my vehicle abandoned on the side of the road. All of my belongings were gone, but luckily I was able to get my car back. Those men haven't been caught. I still can't relax knowing that they have my ID, which has my home address on it. I'm a 22-year-old in college, so naturally I'm out partying a lot with friends. I spend most of my weekends out at local bars and clubs to unwind from the stress of studying. A few nights ago, I was at a tiki bar with a couple of friends. We had some drinks, and when midnight rolled around, we decided to call it a night. My friends Amy and Jessica walked home since they lived nearby, and I called an Uber since my apartment was a 20-minute drive from this bar. I waited for a few minutes by myself, and a man approached me. He looked to be a lot older than me and was likely drunk. He kept asking me for my number, and I politely declined and looked away from him. He walked around me and insisted on getting my number. I was beginning to get stressed out at this point, but there were a few people around in the distance, so I knew I could always scream and cause a scene if the man tried anything. My Uber pulled up, and I quickly got in. eager to escape the drunk man asking for my number. My Uber driver said hello and began driving. I texted my friends that I got into the Uber and began scrolling on my Instagram account. After a couple of minutes, I got a notification from Uber. "I've arrived." I instantly went into panic mode. The car I had quickly gotten into was a stranger's, not my Uber driver. I tried to remain calm and decided to make up an excuse to be let out of the vehicle. I told the man that my plans got cancelled and just to let me out on the side of the road so I could walk home. He insisted on driving me home, which was obviously a lie, since he was driving in a completely random direction at this point. I kept insisting, my voice showing obvious signs of distress, but the man kept driving. I threatened to call the police, and only then did the man listen to me. He slowed the car down, stopped to unlock the doors. I bolted out of there. I ran as fast as I could so he wouldn't follow me. I ended up calling a new Uber driver and got home safely, but I can't stop thinking about how badly that night could have ended for me. The man clearly had bad intentions, and I shame myself every day for my decision to not check the license plate before getting in. Please, always use caution when getting into strangers' vehicles. A few months ago, I was out at the club with my friends. Our college had just ended for the summer, and my classmates and I decided we should celebrate at a local club to kick off the beginning of summer vacation. We all got there around 10 p.m. and partied the night away. I was pretty drunk around closing time, so my friend Jackson called me an Uber and stayed with me until I got in. My memory is quite hazy for the ride home, but I remember that my Uber driver was a middle-aged man. He was asking me all sorts of questions, like if I had a boyfriend, how old I was, where I went to school, and a bunch of personal questions I felt awkward about answering. But since I was drunk, I naively conversed with the man. Eventually, I made it home, and my Uber driver, who had told me his name was Chris, said bye. I walked into my apartment and went to bed instantly, drunk and tired from the night I had just had. I woke up the next morning very hungover, so I laid in bed for a while after waking up. I could smell my next-door neighbors cooking some food and decided that a meal would probably help cure my hangover. When I got out of bed and into the kitchen, I realized what I had smelled was not coming from my neighbor's house. The smell was coming from my kitchen. All in front of me was a freshly cooked meal. Eggs, bacon, and hash browns, all stuff I didn't have in my fridge at the time. Then I saw a note on the counter that read, "Breakfast for my girl." Signed, Chris. I knew instantly that I had forgot to lock the door, and the man who drove me home must have taken advantage of that. I ran out of my apartment as fast as I could and called the police. They checked my apartment, but didn't find anyone there. They took my statement, and I gave them all of the information I had on him from his Uber profile. The cops suggested that I install security cameras and alarms in case the man decided to come back. I got cameras installed the same day, but so far I haven't seen the man since. I consider myself very lucky to not have been hurt that night.